We are recording the interview of Tom Alesi. This interview is being conducted by David Barry from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. The interview is being conducted at the Double Tree Hotel in Miamisburg, Ohio. It is 10:30 a.m. on September 13th, 2019. Well, why don't we start with where and when were you born?
I was born in Salem, Ohio on November 8, 38.
And who were your parents and what were their occupation?
My parents was Lona. Her maiden name was Fox. My father's name was Frederick, went by Fred. He was a tool and die maker in Salem, and my mother was this homemaker.
Did you have any siblings?
I have two brothers. There was one sister that was born, stillborn.
I'm sorry to hear that. Did any of your family members serve in the military as well?
Uncles.
What branch did they serve in?
During World War II, I had my father's five brothers served, one in the Marines, three in the Army, and one in the Navy.
So what were you doing before you decided to join the military?
I had graduated high school in '57, and I got an apprentice job working as a tool and die maker, following my father's steps. Didn't have the I knew they didn't have the finances to go to college, so I figured I'd go into an apprenticeship program. And I started that. I did that for maybe 16 months, and I was planning on going to night school at the University of Youngstown. But then I applied for that, but before I actually started it, I decided to go into the Navy with three or four of my other friends that I graduated with. And I started, joined the Navy on October 8th of 58, and took my basic training at Great Lakes. And from there I did a 1 year of shore duty at the Naval Air Station in Norfolk, up by Breezy Point. From there I got orders to go to the USS Topeka, which was being built in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was a World War II cruiser that they brought up from Washington State, and I think there was four cruisers. They were going to update them to missile ships, and the one I was on was the U.S. Topeka being refitted in Brooklyn Navy Yard. They had one going into Philadelphia, one in Boston. I think the other one was down in, I forget what other shipyard that was, the Little Rock. But anyhow, I was on CLG-8. That's what it was designated as. And after going down commissioning it in Brooklyn, we did sea trials and out of Norfolk, out of New York and Norfolk, and then from there to Yorktown to load ammunition, and then from there we stopped at various ports on our way to our home port, which was going to be in Long Beach, California.
Why don't we back up just a bit? What made you join the Navy?
Oh, I don't know. I just I liked not being close to the water, but I did have a boat in a reservoir area, not too far. But I don't know. I just kind of liked the thought of traveling, and I just liked the thought of it. And
What did your family think about you joining the military?
Um, I really don't know. I guess they were probably sorry to see me leave the house, but I think they was kind of proud that I served. At least I hope so.
So did your uncle serving in World War II? Did that play any factor?
They were, oh, yeah, probably my uncle that was in the Navy. I just kind of, I don't know, I just liked the Navy.
Or
I didn't look forward to sleeping in a foxhole.
so you did your basic training at Great Lakes.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It wasn't bad. It's typical boot camp. It wasn't like the Marines, or I don't know what the Army's basic training was, but a lot of classes, not much drilling and stuff like that. We did march to class, and it was basically learning about the Navy, a little bit of firefighting, damage control, just life aboard a ship, and I had put into when I took the testing to see what kind of a class, what opportunities the Navy would have. I thought I'd like the airborne side of the Navy, and that's why they sent me to the Naval Air Station. But I was guaranteed a school to go to aviation electronics by the recruiter, and when I got my orders after boot camp, my next duty station, they told me Norfolk, Virginia, the Naval Air Station. And I said, well, geez, I thought I was going to aviation electronics school. And they said, well, yeah, you are, but eventually the schools are filled up, and we're sending you to an air base, and once there's an opening, you get orders to go to the school. I think it was in Oklahoma. And so once I got down to the air station, I did my 3 months of mess cooking, and while I was doing that, I decided I didn't want to be after seeing the air base and that, I wanted to do, I think I was a guided missileman. And I talked to my division officer, who was a warrant officer, and this was just before I went mess cooking. And he said, oh yeah, no problems. You got the scores that you could enter that school. And we're going to send you mess cooking for 3 months, and then come see me and you should be all set. So I did my 3 months, went in and said, oh yeah, we're all set. I got the paperwork right here. All you have to do is sign it, sign the paperwork. So I was reading through it, and at the end it said, upon entering the school, my enlistment would be automatically add another 2 years to it. And I already signed up for 4. So I told them that what I'd seen in the Navy so far, I wasn't going to extend another day. And that didn't go over very well, so he wanted to send me back to mess cooking again. And the guy who was in charge of the mess deck was a third-class bosun mate that probably had 20 years in. And he saw me walk in there, and he wanted to know why I was there, and I told him that my division officer wasn't too pleased with me because I turned down an application, and he said, you can't do that, he can't do that, we're going to sign you up for a captain's mess. And I said, no, I don't want to make waves. And so he said if I didn't do it, he'd kick my ass. But it never came to that because the Navy had a thing that you could only do 3 months mess cooking and 3 months compartment cleaning, and the other 6 months had to be on job training. And so I did my year there at the Naval Air Station, and I wanted sea duty. And so when my orders came in to go to pre-commissioning school in Norfolk, that I looked forward to that, and then being up to Brooklyn to go aboard ship there and put it in commission. And then I liked sea duty, I liked the cruiser, and as soon as we got to the West Coast, we were there for maybe a couple weeks, or a couple months rather, and then we did a Westpac cruise. So we hit all the different countries and typical Westpac cruise. And that was that lasted 7 months. And so we came back to Long Beach, and we spent maybe 6 months there in Long Beach, in and out of the, going to different places along the coast, San Francisco, San Diego, typical stuff. And we were getting ready to go back overseas again, and I only had 6 months to do. So they said the last cruise lasted 7 months, and we may have that this time if we go over there, and that's going to be beyond your discharge date. You can sign up to extend for the cruise, and whenever the first line hit the deck or the dock in Long Beach, you're automatically discharged. Well, I didn't want to take a chance. I wanted to get out on my date that I was supposed to. So they sent me down to San Diego, gave me orders there to a destroyer that was anchored in the bay. And it was a World War II type destroyer. And said that it was going to be going up to Washington State to go into the dry docks for modernization, updated. So I figured, well, that's pretty good duty. My last 6 months would be in Washington State, basically shore duty. And, so I reported aboard the ship, and one of the guys told me that there's no Liberty. There's only Liberty has they call it Cinderella Liberty. You had to be back on board by midnight. And I said, "Geez, what's going on?" And they said, "Well, we don't know. We're sitting here waiting for orders." And so that was probably a couple weeks there, and then we finally went to sea. And once we got out to sea on our way to Pearl Harbor, so we found out we were going to Pearl Harbor, and from there we were going to go to Christmas Island to do the atomic bomb testing. So the last 6 months we were going back and forth between Christmas Island and Pearl Harbor. We'd go down there for a couple of weeks, and our sister ship would come down and relieve us, and we'd come back to Pearl Harbor. But we spent more time down there because every time we were supposed to be relieved, this sister ship would get partway down there and then break down. They'd have to go back to Pearl Harbor, so we'd stay down longer. So out of the 6 months down there, I think there was like 32 bomb tests off of Christmas Island, all air bursts, and there was one site or one test off of Johnson Island. It was going to be a high altitude missile launch, and that was supposed to happen early while we were down there, but they had a mishap. The thing blew up on the launch pad, and a lot of people got radiated there. There was a lot of radiation on Johnson Island. So I guess they were rebuilding it for later on. But yes, out of the 32 nuclear bombs, I probably saw 2/3 of them. And our main task there was there was a rectangular area, 300 by 500 miles around the island, to keep shipping out of the area. That was a restricted area. And the Russians were there following it, so they had 2 trawlers and a mothership, the bigger ship. So we were tailing them and making sure that they stayed without, not into the restricted area. So they always ran right along the edge of it. And they would drop instrument packages in the water, and, weather balloons, and we just monitored them. And I was a radarman, and so we had the radio circuits up. We knew when the bombs were going to go off, and all the bombs were all detonated in air early morning. It was still dark, and we'd pull right alongside the mothership because they had all kind of antennas, and we wanted to see what they were radiating. And so we'd be on deck there watching, and as soon as the bomb would go off, it would light up just like it was noontime. And we would watch what they were doing. And it started out, it was kind of friendly when we first went on station. And we'd pull right alongside. We'd be within 30 feet of them and run alongside them. And they would wave, and we'd wave back. And after a little while of that, they'd start shaking their fist at us, and we'd do the same thing. And so it got to be a game, and I was thinking to myself, here's the 2 biggest powers in the world, and we're there playing kid games with them, At one point, once we got on station there too, or we were still friendly, they rigged up a sound system, and they had a recording of Elvis Presley, so they were porting that back to us so we could hear it. So our captain, who was Stanfield Turner, he was a commander at that time. He later became head of the CIA. He wanted to know what kind of recordings or tapes that anybody on the crew had, and somebody had a tape of Midnight in Moscow, and we blasted that back to them. That's why I said kind of kid games, and here's the 2 major powers in the world. So, but that was really my. I did that last 6 months there, and that was an experience. And on the last test, one of the last tests was Johnson Island was back in operation, and we were on our way back to Pearl Harbor. We were probably about halfway between Christmas Island and Pearl Harbor, and we knew we had the radio circuit up. We knew when the thing was going to be detonated and when it was launched. So we were all on deck waiting for it, and that too was late at night or early morning. And when that thing went off, it just lit up everything like it was just daylight, 12 o'clock noon. And Honolulu got the same thing. It lit up Honolulu just like it was daylight in the middle of the night. And I think they had a lot of problems with communications that interfered with communications and I guess TV or whatever. And we were told that they saw the flash of it at the coast of California, which was like 3,000 miles away. And when we saw it go off, and it just it burned up there for maybe I bet a good half hour. It just turned all kind of colors and just rolled and rolled and rolled, and unbelievable. And so that was probably the real highlight. I mean, as far as being a spectacle. I had a stroke here a couple years ago, and it affects my speech, so you have to bear with me.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that was probably one of the most memorable things I saw, and I didn't think too much of it at the time, about being one of the few people that would see something that, that powerful. And before we went down to, they gave us film baths. We wore with our dog tags to record the radiation that we would get for the 6 months I was there. And they told us that they were going to be collected at the end of the testing, and those film baths would be analyzed and to verify the dosage, I guess. But I hear maybe 10, 12 years ago, I moved to another state, and I was cleaning out the attic, and I found my sea bag there with a lot of my old clothes and everything, and so I was going through it, throwing stuff away and stuff I wanted to save. And at the bottom there was my dog tags with that film bath badge. They never collected it.
Wow.
So that's when, I'm not sure how I got involved with the Atomic Veterans Association, but anyhow, I got a contact. He was the area commander for the Northeast. He was, in fact, he's here. Lived in Massachusetts. At that time, I lived in Connecticut. So I got a hold of him, and he told me what to do, to go to a VA hospital and request these ionized tests and get. It was already in my records that I had participated in the bomb testing. And when I told him about the film badge, he said, put that in a safe and keep it in a safe place if you ever need it. So it's in a safe place right now. And but one thing I didn't mention, while we were down there, we pulled into the island, anchored off the island. We brought some scientists on, and they brought in a bunch of their equipment, and they were poking holes in the bulkheads to put sensors through. And when the bomb went off, we had our fantail away from it. We were going away from it, and as soon as it went off, we turned around, went under ground zero, and they just wanted to record what we were seeing, but I never heard what it was. But we went right through ground zero, and from there we went back to San Diego, and I got discharged out of San Diego October 4th, 1962. So out of my 4-year enlistment, they let me out 4 days early. I don't know if you want to go further into what they did after, or you just.
Right. So we'll get to after you get out of the military here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But so it seems like when you joined the Navy, you were kind of under the impression that you were going to do aviation electronics.
I just kind of thought this kind of sounded interesting. I didn't know anything about electronics. I didn't know anything about aviation. But then once I got there, once I didn't get to school right away, and I decided I didn't want to do that anyhow, so I wanted to change it to the guided missile thing, and then that's when I found out I had to extend more. So then when I went aboard ship, I didn't have I tried to change to the fireman's rate. I don't know if you know that, how the Navy does it, but if you're a seaman, our stripes are white. If you're an airman, your stripes are green. And if you're a fireman, they're red. And a fireman is the guys that work below the decks in the engine rooms, and your machinists and stuff like that. So since I had, I was still on the air base when I was eligible to do the tests for a seaman. and I say, well, geez, I had almost a year and a half of machine trade that I would take the fireman's test to be a machinist. And then I got turned down because they said, we don't need a machinist on an air base. So I took the seaman's test. And then once they went aboard the ship, there was a new crew, and we were going to pre-commissioning school down in Norfolk. And all the divisions, people were coming in from all over, to make up the crew. And there were certain divisions that were open looking for men. And one of them was OI division, which is the radar group. And I got into that. And then again, while I was there, my division commander, he said, oh, well, we'll send you to radar school. So I figured, well, I'm going to finally get to go to a school. And then they checked back and said, no, you don't have enough time, so we'll just give you on-the-job training. So that's how I ended up being a radarman, and I did make rate as a radarman. But so then once I got out of the service, then I had my old job back. I could have started my apprenticeship. I could continue that, and that was in Ohio. But while I was in Brooklyn Navy Yard, that's when I met the woman I married, and so I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got discharged. Whether I was going to go back to Ohio or she lived in Brooklyn. I knew I didn't want to live in New York or in Brooklyn, but they had a summer home up in Connecticut, and so when I got discharged, we didn't really know what we were going to do. So we go up there and spent a few weeks and figure it out. So while I was there, I said, geez, I might as well look for a job down here. So I went to a trade school there, and then I talked to the head of the school and told him what I was looking for. And he made an appointment for me right away with a company right there in Connecticut. And so I was in a contest with another guy from the Army. And so I said, well, I'm going back to Ohio for a little bit. I'll pick up my tools. And they've got my own, I got my old job in Ohio. And I liked the one in Connecticut better because the apprentice program was run by the state. And you signed a contract with your employer that they had to keep you employed for the 4 years that it took to learn the trade. And I liked that better, so I brought my tools back, and that's how I ended up in Connecticut. So I spent most of my life in Connecticut, and then just within the last 4 years, we relocated down into Tennessee. I ended up going to night school, and I found out I could go to college on the VA, the GI Bill, but I didn't know that until I was almost done. And so I was working part-time job, and I had kids at the time, and an apprentice didn't pay a lot of money, and so I was working part-time. And then one night at the school, a lot of the Vietnam veterans were coming back and going and started, doing through the GI Bill. And during the break, they were talking amongst themselves, how much they're getting paid per month. Some of them being married, some of them had kids and that. And so one of them asked me, he says, how much you get? And I said, well, I don't get anything. I wasn't in Vietnam. I was in that area, but in '62, but I was involved with other things. And so I'm not eligible for that. And so when I told them I got discharged in '62, they said, "Oh yeah, you're eligible for it. That you should put in for it." So I called, I guess the Veterans Administration or something, and they said, "Oh yeah, you're eligible. You had all this credit up. You could get you could get the benefit for it." And they said the only problem is you only have you had to use it within 10 years after you get discharged. And I said, "Geez, I'm just ready to meet my 10 years." And they said, "Don't worry about it, because I think they're going to extend it another 2 years." And they did. So I got the benefit of getting my degree, and I didn't have to do the part-time job, because VA, the Veterans GI Bill was paying for my college and that. And I graduated as a mechanical engineer, and I worked for a optical company, Perkin-Elmer, and I did almost 40 years there, and we built the Hubble Space Telescope. I did a little bit on that, not too much, but I did work on a classified program, the Hexagon. In fact, it's right here in Wright-Patterson, the Hexagon program. There was a top secret program, spy satellite, the biggest satellite at that time to be launched, and one of the most successful ones. We built 20 of them over the years, and it was the last film-based camera system. And we photographed Russia, China, anything of importance. And the last system, the 20th one, I went out for the launch in Vandenberg, and just before that, the Challenger had blown up, and we used the same strap-ons, the rockets, on the missile that we used. And so we were kind of leery about what went on with the Challenger, and everybody had to stand up and represent their company, what they were putting on the missile, that they were ready to go. And the people that made the strap-ons said, yeah, they were ready, and we were kind of leery, but everybody agreed. And funny how it got blown up right after I left the pad, and we had to be evacuated from Vandenberg, and fire all over the place and debris coming down. And we had guys in the block tower that were stranded down there. Couldn't get them out, and well, eventually did, but that was the last of the system. And we actually got the system was classified for 25 years. We couldn't talk about it. It just got declassified here, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and that's when they put our engineering model on display at Wright-Patterson there. So if you ever go through the museum there, you'll see Hexagon KH9.
Oh yeah, I go there quite a bit, but I gotta look for that one.
You'll see it because it's big. And it's interesting because it was the last of the film-based satellites. After that, it's all real time. But we carried 64 miles of film of I think a 6.6 wide. Kodak made the film, and we made the cameras, and the return vehicles. There's 4 buckets up in the front, and each bucket would fill up. First one up, you'd fill up with film. Once it was filled, then you'd go to the second one, and third, fourth. And when each one was filled, they would jet it down, and once it hit the atmosphere, then a parachute would come out. And then they had a C-130, the Air Force did, out of Hawaii, and they had a big hook coming out of the back, and they'd fly over that as it was coming down, the big parachute, they'd snag onto that parachute and they pull the bucket, we call it the bucket, the return vehicle back with the exposed film. And then from there they would take it up to Kodak, and Kodak would process it. And I used to go up and do post-flight inspection of the film, primarily for the anomalies, maybe damage to the film or something like that. And then we had our guys that do photo interpretation and stuff, and then from there we go down to the Air Force, and I don't know if it's Air Force. Started out to be the CIA, then the Air Force took it over. But they had photo interpreters down in Washington that would go over all the film. But I was interesting. I really enjoyed it. It was something new. It was always challenging. And so that's pretty much that's where I retired. So now I'm taking a good life.
You definitely had some adventure in your life.
Yeah. Got to see a lot of the world. So a lot of good ports and stuff I would have never seen if, not joining the Navy. And always had a warm bunk to sleep in, not like you guys in the Army. But we didn't always get to use it. It was there, but depending on what we were doing.
Was traveling a big reason why you wanted to join the military? Or
Well,
was it just an
the
added bonus?
adventure, seeing the world, and I think that was a good. You know what it was? I went to see South Pacific, the movie there, and it was with the Navy and that. And I said, "Geez, out in the South Pacific," and I said, "Oh God, that really looks nice." And that's probably what really got me over the top to do it. And I got to see a lot of that. So.
Now, were you married during the time that you were going to the Christmas Island and doing?
Christmas Island, yeah.
How were you able to send letters or communicate back home?
Oh, letters, but nothing about what we were doing. And even later, when I was working on this classified hexagon program, my wife, my kids, my neighbors, the building we're in, they had no windows. Nobody knew what was going on in there. And we couldn't talk about it. And, for 25 years after the last one was launched, we couldn't say anything about it. So they never knew what we did. And
how did that affect you, keeping that secret or not being able to say what you were doing?
It was it's hard to tell your wife and what you're doing. I say, well, I'm an engineer, what are you working on? Well, we just work on optical things. You just can't tell them. And we would go, Lockheed was they supplied the vehicle, and they did the final testing in Sunnyvale. And we used to go out there to do, once it was shipped out to them, we'd come out there and do a lot of work on it. Something went down or something like that. So we would check in, and that building there too, nobody knew what was in there. And we'd have to sign in as private contractors. We wouldn't be able to say a company name. We had a pen in our pocket or something that had the company name on it. We couldn't take that. And we couldn't tell them where we worked or anything. So it was kind of exciting, but and working for we didn't know it. We knew it was CIA, but we officially didn't know it. And when the Air Force took over. So, but yeah, it was exciting.
After it all got declassified, did you end up telling your family what you did?
Yeah, they had open house, and actually the Air Force guy that was head of the program, he was there, and we had slides and family members. Some of the people passed away during the program, and their wives never knew, and they were invited to the presentation, and some of them actually cried. They said, "Geez, I never knew what he was involved with, and didn't realize what it was and how important it was." And it was during the Cold War, and I guess Reagan was president then, and when he was negotiating with the Russians about the Cold War there, that they said he knew more what Russia had than the people he was negotiating with had. I seen stuff that was on the ground, and, you know, their sites and stuff, and, but all that's common knowledge now. The resolution of the system was never, it's still classified. They released pictures and stuff, but it's not, the resolution is not what, you know, what you really could see. And I'm sure that's with the new stuff too. But my son, my oldest son, followed in my steps. He's doing the same thing for the same company. And my grandson is doing the same thing there.
Oh, wow.
So.
Were you, you had mentioned when you were doing the nuclear explosion testing about the
Film batch?
Yeah. Were you affected by the radiation during that time?
Not that I know of. I mean, we had to get it, but I don't know what the results were. I don't have anything, medical problems that are related to that I know of. But I did ask about when I went to the VA and told them what, you know, that I was wanted the radiation, the ionized testing done. And I asked them, I said, my wife had bone cancer, multiple myeloma. And that was one of the cancers that was listed as a possible effect. And I asked them about that. I said, could I ever transfer that to my wife or my kids? Mostly my wife I was talking about. And they said, no, whatever you have, you have. You can't give it to somebody else. And I found out later that that's not true. That and I just found out here now, it can not only affect your spouse, your kids, your grandkids. They're saying now what the French are saying, it could go on like 6, 7 generations, where maybe nothing happens, but how are you ever going to prove that? I mean, there's people have cancer all the time, and you relate maybe the rate of cancer or somebody who's been exposed to radiation, the chances of you getting it is probably a lot higher. And you can see people that are here today that went through the same thing and were healthy as far as we know, but we also know shipmates and people that were involved with the same testing come down with some pretty bad cancers and have died. And I volunteered to be the state commander for Tennessee, and I got a list of for the Tennessee. There's 26 of us that were involved with nuclear bombs or radiation, exposed to radiation. So there's only 26 of them that I know of, and there's probably people out there. That's only the people that belong to the Atomic Veterans Association. But you know, down there where they did a lot of the processing oak Oak Ridge in Tennessee. And all those people were exposed to it. They were civilians. And, well, a lot of them not civilian, but a lot of them that did the work. So. But yeah, I guess I was lucky. I guess that's your DNA or whatever's inside you. I asked about it, or they told me that whatever radiation you got, it stays with you. It doesn't go away, and it accumulates. So if you go for X-ray or something like that, you should only have an X-ray unless you think you really need it. You know, like I went to the dentist for a root canal here a few months ago, and the first thing they did was I want 4 X-rays of my mouth, and I got bad knees, and I want X-rays of my knees, and so I try to not do it, only what's really needed. You know, you really need it, okay. If you don't really need it, you just want a picture of it. I'm not going to go through it, because whatever you get, you keep. It's inside you. You never get rid of it.
Well, I have a couple more questions left for you. What life lessons would you say that you got from your military service?
Oh, I think it was a good experience. I think a lot of people benefit from going to the service. They learn a lot. They grow up a lot. They see a lot. Know how to get along with different people. You see how the other people in the world live, and it opens your eyes up. I've seen places that in Korea that it was so bad. I mean, you just go. If you had to go to the bathroom, you just went right in the street, and you had to close the windows. We couldn't even get liberty in Korea. Only way we could go ashore was if we signed up for a tour. And I didn't go on a tour, but I played for the ship basketball team. And we were in Chennai, Korea, and that's where the Korean Naval Academy was. And we challenged them to a basketball game, or they challenged us, I forget what, but we were the flagship of 7th Fleet. We had an admiral on board, and so we were going to pick us up by a bus and take us over to the academy there, and we went through the center of town, and it was so bad they had to put the windows up as the stink and from just the human waste and just the way they live. I mean, you don't picture that when you actually see it. But anyhow, we were called in before we went over by the admiral, and he said that the Koreans, this is not their national sport like it is in here we do football, basketball, and stuff like that. This is not one of their main sports, so we want you to win, but we don't want you to run a score up on them. So, and we had a couple of the guys that played college basketball, and so we went over there, and the gymnasium was like a barn. You know how our floors were all nice polished and sanded? Well, these are like barn planks. They weren't even. You dribble the ball, and all of a sudden they would go flying out. And they were running around like ants, the Koreans, because they were a lot shorter, and we had some pretty tall guys. And halftime, we were barely ahead, and by the time the game was over, they beat us. They ran us into the ground. They ran around like ants. But that was stuff I would have never seen. And some of the islands, Christmas Island, Had natives on there, not many. I think there was like 200 or something like that, and they would come out in their little boats every morning, go fishing. They lived off of fish. I think they said they had, I don't know if they had goats on the island or not. It was a small island, but I think they primarily lived off of the ocean. And we had on the ship we have a sports locker there. You could get fishing poles or basketballs or whatever. So some of the guys would go fishing, but they told us you could catch the fish, but we couldn't eat them. We'd throw them back. And yet we'd see the natives going out there, and that was their livelihood. But yes, I was glad to get out, but I was glad I went in. I mean, I had a lot of memories. I saw a lot of things that I would never have seen before, and a lot of appreciates where you came from and what you have. Yeah, it was good.
Well, I only have one question left for you, and that is, what message would you like to leave behind for future generations who view this interview?
Oh, I think they should do it. I think it's everybody has their own experience and things that they will want to leave behind. Stuff probably that I've said here that I've never said to my kids or anybody else. And I don't know. I think everybody should do a little bit of service, just to see what it's like and grow up a little bit. And a lot of people, since it's a volunteer service now, they don't get that experience. And I think it's good for everybody. Well, on your case, peacetime and wartime's two kind of different things, and you see a lot of stuff that you carry with you for a long time, for sure. Mm. But appreciate for people to do that. But thank you.
Thank you. Well, this concludes our interview, and I just want to say thank you for doing this interview, and thank you for your service.
I appreciate you. Thank you.